thought it was just me that sung along to it at home. Have you ever done that with a group of people before? It's brilliant. What do you think, gentlemen? Was that a good introduction to London?
People talking during a movie, that's pretty fucked up.
It's always great to hear the la-las in sync. If you look close, I'm way out of sync.
Now, shall we? Well, we'll start from the very beginning. Who out of this audience has seen the show before? And did you discover it via the movie? Did you discover it via the original YouTube? Sci-Fi Channel. Sci-Fi Channel. YouTube. Yes.
We'll accept any of those as answers.
A friend of yours worked on the show? What was the name?
Oh, Heidi LeClaire! We love Heidi.
Heidi used to hit Frank in the head when he'd say something dirty.
No, it wasn't dirty stuff. It was stuff she disagreed with. She would be sitting behind me when we were writing the movie, and which, in other words, watching the movie and yelling out riffs, and she would type them all in. And then every now and then, I'd say something, and I remember this specifically. She hit me on the back of the head. I like Kenny Rogers.
Well, what's Heidi doing now?
I don't know. I haven't seen her in years.
Okay, we haven't either.
I have to say that's the best burlesque name I've heard in quite a while. Heidi LeClaire. She should do. Now, where to start? Well, I suppose probably the most obvious question is, how did your involvement with Mystery Science Theater 3000 start? So, with the pilot that Joel did in '88.
87, I think, maybe 88. Let's say
it
88.
premiered in '88.
Yeah.
On KTMA.
We started. Joel had this idea, and Josh and I knew Joel from doing stand-up in Minneapolis, and Joel said, "I got this idea for this show. Why don't you come over and help me at the TV studio tomorrow?" And that was the pitch to us. And we went over and we really had no idea what was going on. Josh and I walked in, we picked up, I picked up Crow, what was Crow then, a pile of plastic, and Josh picked up the puppets that were at that time Beeper and early Tom Servo and Gypsy. And they were all very crude at that time, and we just really just started doing the show.
Has anyone seen the pilot? I think I've got a look on YouTube. It's quite, what surprised me about the pilot was it's the show. It's still the show. Apart from the robots not being in the cinema watching the film with Joel, it's exactly the same prototype from day one.
It's pretty close. In the early days, you probably all know that we improv'd the show. We had no time to write it, and the first time we saw those movies was the first time we said something to those movies. So it was real time, and we were trapped in the theater, just like the premise. We were literally like 2 feet off of a green screen wall in order to get the camera far enough back in the studio to record the silhouettes. So we were had our feet up, green screen, sitting next to each other, like in a space capsule, and there was no script. We were trying to fill, we realized right away that we had to say something back to the movie, because sitting there with dead air is not fun.
Yeah. And I think that was the original series, wasn't it? And then when it went to Comedy Central, you had writers on board. And to bring Frank into this, when was your first involvement with the show?
The show had been on the air. It had been on KTMA for that season, and then it had been on the Comedy Channel, which was before it was Comedy Central. It was called the Comedy Channel. The Comedy Channel merged with the Ha Network and became Comedy Central, and so it was just about to start its first Comedy Central season, and I was doing stand-up comedy in, not to brag, but Grand Forks, North Dakota, and at the Westward Ho, and I got a phone call in my hotel room from Mike Nelson saying, Frank, we got picked up for a second season at Comedy Channel, and Josh has left the show, and there's an opening for a writer, and we're going to ask you if you would want to do it. And of course I said yes. I mean, I wasn't about to say, no, you know what, I love doing one-nighters in North Dakota, so I don't know if I'm really available for this opportunity that I've since I was a kid watching the Dick Van Dyke Show on television, where he played a comedy writer. Being a TV comedy writer was the profession I always wanted to have, and this was someone calling me up and saying, you are going to have that opportunity now to do this. So it was, that moment it was one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me.
Did he leave out, oh, and it's a puppet show?
He did, I think I knew it was a puppet show, but I would have been, you know, if Paul Winchell had called me up when I was a kid, you want to work on Winchell Mahoney time, I would have been excited about that too. So I wasn't, puppets, I don't have any snobbery towards puppets, nor should I.
The pool of writers, how big was that?
Well, when I started, it was, the writing room for that first year that I was there was mainly Joel, Trace, Mike, and myself. Kevin also participated, but he was still also editing the show back then. Back then, like, a lot of people were doubling, like Trace was building sets, and Joel was building sets, and Mike was the head writer. But there was kind of that core of the four of us, and then in the next season, Kevin was freed from his editing, so he was always in the room. And then we hired Mary Jo Peel and another really funny person, Paul Chaplin. And then we had a couple of and Bridget Jones, not the British Bridget Jones, but the one married to Mike Nelson, who's really hilarious person. She was hired as well to be a writer. So so it kind of, the staff grew a little bit as the years progressed and as the budget grew.
Well, we also recruited people outside the office. We would send tapes to them to write to and then send their scripts back. Some of the early, the guys on The Onion from Madison.
Dan Harmon, right? Wasn't Dan Harmon? Dan Harmon was one of those guys.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's right, Dan Harmon. And I think at full tilt we had up to 10 people in that writing room, plus these scripts we were getting in.
We had another guy named Mike Dodge, who was really funny.
Mike Dodge was great. That other guy, I can't remember.
Yeah, he was great.
Bill Corbett came in later in the Comedy Channel.
Yeah, that was after I was gone. But
it's funny, one of my best friends swears it's improvised for the whole thing. I was quite mortified there was writers, but I think that's the biggest compliment.
Well, I was just about to say that, is that I think most comedy really works if people are not aware that it's been written. If it just, I think most people think stand-up, not most, I don't know if it's most people, a lot of people think stand-up comedians are just on stage talking off the top of their heads, and that's what it's supposed to seem like, even though it's a routine that they've worked on for years and have honed and have done many times before. And if it came off as improvised, then that's a great thing. But it wasn't at all. Maybe a little bit here and there was some, but it was very tightly, not just written, but rewritten and rewritten and rewritten.
Because of the gaps, you only have, as you guys
We
know.
had to mind the gaps.
Yes.
In England.
So, obviously, the relationship between the two of you on screen is magical.
Yes.
How much alcohol was consumed in that relationship?
I have never had alcohol through the whole run of the show. I was asked to stop drinking before Mystery Science Theater ever started, but it was like being drunk anyway.
People make the assumption that we must have been high or on something while we were writing this, and we weren't. It would be impossible to do that much work.
It's hard work.
One of the best lines about writing comedy that I've ever heard was on The Simpsons. One time, I think it was the Poochie episode, I forget which episode it was, but Otto goes, "Wow, a talking dog." He's talking to the writers of Itchy and Scratchy. Goes, "What were you guys on when you wrote that?" And the guy goes, "We were eating rotisserie chicken." And that's very much what a writer's room is like, just eating food.
There was one episode where we thought it might help. Joel and Josh and I went out and got a 6-pack of Mickey's Big Mouth and some tequila, and I don't think we finished the day. I don't remember what movie it is. Josh remembers better than I do, but you can't do that while you're under the influence.
No, writing is hard work. It's like doing homework. It's just like.
I highly recommend watching the show under the influence.
I agree with what you just said, though. Being a writer, which I can fancy myself as, it's like you always have homework all the time.
And it is. It's one of those. I think, but that's the biggest compliment I think can be paid to the show, that it looks natural, because you guys make it look easy. That's the thing. Now, the biggest surprise I had with the show, researching it more for this, was that it was all shot in Minneapolis. I presumed once the show had done the initial local TV station, you'd move to LA, and but I love in a way. Obviously, at that kind of time, you guys were based there. The company that was set up, is that just completely in-house? That was the only production going on there?
That's all we did. Best Brains was set up to do Mystery Science Theater. And the channel wanted us to come to New York, but we would have been very restricted in what we could do because their studio was so tiny. And we had the luxury of working in an old screen print factory and converting it to our studio. So we had an office and shop, and we could leave the sets up. They were standing sets. So that was a big advantage to doing it. Also, being in the Midwest, we were left alone. So there was no interference because nobody wanted to go there.
But I think that's, in retrospect, looking at it now, I can understand why. It's like you've got creative control. You've got that to sort of, as a group.
And I didn't even, since it was my first TV show I ever worked on, I didn't even appreciate how unique that situation was. And I worked on a lot of TV shows since, and I've rarely, if ever, been in a similar situation where the people making the show had complete creative freedom and weren't getting interference, weren't getting notes from the, in a lot of other shows I've written on, you submit you submit your story ideas and they have to approve that, and you submit the first draft, you submit the outline, they have to approve that, and there was none of that on Mystery Science Theater with Comedy Central. They just let us do whatever we wanted, and they didn't give us any notes, and I didn't realize that it was nirvana as far as television production is concerned.
That's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you're an independent or you've got control, like Louis. I mean, he can do whatever he wants. And
there's a few instances where I know The Simpsons, at least in the past, the studio executives had to ask permission to come to the table reads. That's like completely unheard of.
Yeah, I think that's the genius of it, and I hadn't realised that. I think by default, created this whole world that you were able to completely go to those extremes.
Well, I think when you don't have that interference, that's how you make the connection with the audience that we had. You kind of go directly to the sensibilities of the audience, because we did a lot of kind of obscure references, but the thing about those obscure references is that someone would be out there going, I don't believe they just referenced my favorite Emerson, Lake and Palmer record, and then they would like feel this very strong connection to the show because something had been mentioned, or whether it was that or Frank Zappa or some old movie or something like that. People would feel very connected to it because they didn't hear those references anywhere else, because most of the time those kind of things are filtered out of shows before they get on the air.
It's fun too to be able to send those signals out and have them come back. we were talking about Firesign Theater at lunch today, and it's when you're isolated and you think you're the only person who knows this stuff.
Right.
It's so nice to go, oh, you've heard of that too.
And before the internet,
Yes.
before that,
Yeah.
I think I'll ask the question I sort of posed to you when I first met you a few moments ago. Was did you really think that you'd be in London in 2014?
I didn't think that in 2014 that I'd be here. This only came together like about a month ago, so this is a very miraculous thing that I'm very grateful for.
I thought I would have been in custody, but I didn't.
I had to. My passport had expired. I had to go through the nightmare of getting a new passport, but it was worth it.
But to the fact that the show has been off the air for how many, 15 years now, and yet it's just as loved, has just as many fans, and is far
More fans, actually.
Yeah,
now
yeah, I
than
think so.
when it was first on, because that's the internet and the DVDs have. We were talking just before the show about how the show seems much more. We get much more of a reaction from people. When we were doing the show, nobody was making a fuss about it, and you know, it really felt that we were doing it in complete obscurity, and it's just grown through the years, the popularity of it.
Because I presume that the show was with Comedy Central. It was a network show that went around the whole country.
Yeah, but the Comedy Central in those days didn't have as large a reach as it has now. And for instance, our first year, I think when we first did it, it wasn't on in Minneapolis at all.
We had to go to another community to watch the premiere.
Yeah.
Because we didn't get I think we only got Ha at that.
Yeah.
It was Ha, right?
Ha, and then Ha, which originally they called it Ha. Their first choice was they were going to call it but then they decided to call it Ha. But they were like you know, they were kind of like a TV Land kind of. It was all reruns of comedy shows, and then the Comedy Channel, and then they merged together, you know, and that's what became Comedy Central.
If it's any consolation, I feel exactly the same. The channels that I horror host on, no one's ever heard of, and I think I'm just doing it to myself. But it's amazing how the show's grown and it's so loved. And also we were talking about the age level as well, because although it's quite a grown-up show, it's got quite family appeal.
Yeah, well, it has the puppets who are adorable, and yeah, we do our Cinematic Titanic live shows that we've done. A lot of people come with their kids. A lot of grown-up people come with their parents and say, yeah, this is my dad, he turned me on. We used to watch it together. You know, there's a lot of that.
I think. Now, guys, I'm sure you have a lot of questions you want to ask yourselves, so I'll have a think in your heads of anything that you want to ask, and we'll have the lady with the microphone. Ah, there you are, fantastic. We'll do that in a second. And I'll just pose the first question was, out of all the shorts that you've done, and I've been watching a couple today, do you have any particular favourites out of the short films?
The circus one. Is it a Day at the Circus? Day at the Circus. Yeah.
The two girls in pink.
I think the shorts were my favorite part of the whole series, because they often presented such a bombastic view of what America should be like at that time and how you should behave. And it was just such a perfect thing to rail against.
I think that the DNA of dysfunctional families in our modern world is in the short A Date with Your Family, which is...
I watched that one today.
Yeah,
and yes, it's
pretty amazing. And Mr. Be Natural is another one that I thought
that
was
is
really
still
funny.
such a weird, I still don't understand why they thought that casting was appropriate for small children to learn a horn.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
yeah. They're mentally scarring for life. Okay, well, so shall we start with some questions? Oh, that was really quick. Okay, we'll start to go for this gentleman down here. We'll start and we'll come back to you.
One of the things that's always intrigued me is the choice of stingers at the end of the shows.
Ah, the stingers, yes.
I mean, it's one of my favorite things because I've read on the internet you guys all just would pick that one out of preference. I was wondering, how did you come to that decision? Was it just like a round robin, someone got to pick 5 seconds, or was it like everyone all said, oh, that's the stinger?
When we would watch the film as a group, we would look for those moments, and then it was always pretty obvious which one was the most appropriate. Like, help me.
Yeah.
That one. I think that might have been one that started it. Yeah.
And it would just be as we were watching the film, there'd be a moment and you'd be like, oh, that's a stinger. And it was kind of unique quality that would make, like Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, which is nothing but weird stuff from start to finish. But there's one scene where just the way the guy laughs, and then that was the stinger.
It's a good point, actually, because I hadn't realized that you were helping out with the choosing of the films, weren't you?
Yes, my job was to HBO Downtown Productions, which was the company that was behind Comedy Central at the time, would send us boxes of VHS tapes, and it was my job to, on a certain day, to just go through them and kind of cull them, and then recommend to everybody else, I just picked this tape out of a box called Manos, the Hands of Fate. And I think, guys, maybe we should look at this.
But you presented it like it was, we had bad cancer results.
Yes.
I have some bad news and some good news.
Because I do remember that we watched it during lunch while we were eating. We got lunch. And my memory of it, and this is probably just a cartoonish memory in my head, is of everyone with their food just looking at it. That might be like my cartoonish reinterpretation of, but it was kind of like that. I mean,
Yeah,
people were kind of looking at it in open mouth horror. One, for the fact of how weird it was, and two, for the fact that we were going to have to do it.
I saw the film before seeing your guys' version of it. Now I've seen the Mystery Science Season 3000 version. There's no way I could ever see it any other way.
And will you see the HD version of it? Someone has restored it.
Seriously? That's
Yes.
on Blu-ray?
Yes, they found the print and they struck a new print, and it's going to be in glorious, some sort of color. You can't make it up.
Because it's 16mm home movie, I think that was shot on.
Yeah.
So the shot's only about 4.
And the same person who did it in HD is also putting as many snuff films as he can find in and restoring them in HD. Because that's, to me, that movie has that kind of vibe to it.
You know, they say that 90% of the films shot during the silent era are lost forever, and yet somebody finds a print of the Manos. Is there a God?
Worst thing is I probably will buy that Blu-ray.
I've just been an advertisement for it. Oh, I'm helping too, aren't I?
Okay, any more questions? Should we go for this? Oh, probably should have we've got a microphone here, so the people at the back can hear.
Excluding this one, is it okay if I ask her 2 questions?
Oh, cool.
Sure.
Yeah, love it.
If you ask us a follow-up question, it means you can never be part of the White House press corps.
You have to use a different voice for the second question.
It's okay, I'm not really that good at politics anyway. So my first question is, were there some films that you planned to riff, however you couldn't in the end due to legal issues, like I'm guessing you could riff This Planet's Earth, the Mystery Science Theater, the movie, because
Right.
it was
That would have been too
distributed
expensive to do for the TV show.
Yeah.
Right, and it was distributed by Universal, and you know you had to get the rights for it. And second question is, the sets and props from This Planet Earth, were they real? Did you actually get to use them? Because for the movie?
Those were all built. Those were all recreated.
Ah,
The stuff
crap.
that we... Actually, we went into Universal's archives and got those. We looked at the back lot and... Are you happy now? No, all that stuff, I don't know how, they built the interocitor. I don't know how Patrick and Jeff made that stuff, but it looked great. It looked perfect. And the book, that manual of thing, what was it called?
The interocitor?
The book, yes, the book, yes, thing.
That's a good point, actually. Where was the film shot? Was that still
That
the
was
same
also
studios?
shot in Minneapolis.
Paisley Park.
Yeah, it's Prince's studio, Paisley Park. Scarves and candles everywhere. But yeah, we shot the silhouette at Paisley Park because it was big enough. And then we shot the host segments at a place called Energy Park, which closed soon after we were there.
And also, the other part of your question was, there were films that, for whatever reason, we got in as screeners, and then we're hopeful we could do, and then we couldn't get the rights to them. I remember there was an Elvis movie,
Yes.
Charo, I think it was called, a Western, and then there was Moment by Moment with Lily Tomlin and John Travolta, which we wanted to do. And I think
Beautiful film.
yes, it's very
And
hard.
they are the perfect couple to be a romantic.
Why did those two kids end up together?
Well, let me tell you later.
And actually, the original, the original title of Moment by Moment was "Are You Fucking Kidding Me?"
that is on the Blu-ray. Any more questions?
Sort of corollary to that last one, were there any movies that you started getting into riffing and you hit a wall to the point where you're thinking, I can't do this anymore, I don't want to do this movie?
Every movie we looked at. Every movie, it would be about 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and we'd go, oh, geez, we're only halfway.
There was, once we committed to doing it, there was no turning back. You know, there was never an instance where we got the rights to a film and then halfway through writing it, called up Comedy Central and said, sorry. That once we were committed, we were committed.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so there was a lot of pain. I remember Castle of Fu Manchu was particularly painful, and there was one incident, I think, with the film Time of the Apes, when we were writing it, and for some reason we thought it was going to end very soon, but, and it just kept going on and on and on, and it was, and we were like screaming.
Ape time is different than our time.
But now when I look back at all that, you know, we would complain about it a lot, but then now when I look back with some perspective, I say, you know what, we were getting paid to watch TV, so
Yes. And
this is
often
it was all pretty great.
Often the movies that were the worst for us to experience turned out to be the best episodes.
Yeah.
We just put more pain into it. And it really mimicked the dilemma that the hosts, who shall remain nameless, Joel and Mike and the bots had to experience. So it was really trapped. We were trapped in a room watching a movie.
I think Manos didn't Forrester and Frank apologize for it.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, individually you go, I'm so sorry. Schedule-wise, how long did it take to write one episode?
Writing took, what, three or 4 days?
We would watch the film for one day. We'd go through the whole film, yell out as many riffs, you know, way more riffs than we'd ever use in the show. We'd do that for a day. Then the next day, we would spend writing the host segments. And then the third day, we would come back and go through the movie again and yell out a million riffs once again, more than we could possibly use. And then after that, for like 2 days after that, while Trace and Joel and Mike were going off to do their other various responsibilities, building things and stuff like that, myself, Mary Jo Peele, and Paul Chaplin would each take a section of the film and go through and do what we called line assignment, where we go through the whole script, and they'd all have time codes, and we'd pick out, you know, there'd be like 5 lines for one moment, and we'd say, oh, that's you know, in our section of the film that we were assigned to, we'd go, oh, that's a good line, and that sounds like a Crow line. That's a good line. That's the best out of all the lines. That sounds like Joel would say that, or Mike would say that. And so then that in turn would mean that we turn it into a kind of a cohesive script, you know. And then we rehearse it after that. And while we were rehearsing it, more changes were made, more lines were thrown in as we were rehearsing. So yeah, that whole process was about 5 or 6 days, I think.
Yeah, I think the whole schedule was about 9 days to complete an episode with prop building and actually shooting the episodes. We shot the film on 1 day. We'd rehearse, we'd go through the movie twice, and then shoot it that afternoon. And then the next day we would do host segments. We would always shoot the satellite segments with bots in the morning, and then Frank and I would come in the afternoon and do our bit.
Right.
After everyone had had lunch and just wanted to go home.
And even after the riffs were filmed, there would still maybe even be even more rewrites in the editing, you know. We maybe change lines even after we filmed it.
I was going to say, did you do any post-looping on it?
Yeah, we would change. So it was like the writing of it was a process that happened all throughout the various aspects of it, yeah.
You can always tell if we've inserted something or if we took something out because Crow will be flapping and he either will be saying something out of sync or as much as you can sync, or just nothing coming out at all. I probably was going into my Tourette's.
Well, covered beautifully, I'm sure. Any more questions? Should we go? Let's go to the back, actually. Either those two lovely gentlemen up there.
Was Crow's head on backwards?
In the theater, it looks like Crow's head is facing the opposite direction, but that's just you wanting him to look at you. It's actually an optical illusion. He was, come on, I know what I'm doing, I know where to, but yes, it looked that way, because like Servo's heads was round, and Mike and Joel's heads were basically round, and Crow was the odd one out. It's a good question, though, because that bothers a lot of people.
I suppose because the back of the head is see-through, isn't it?
Yeah.
The silhouette looks the same either way.
It does. It could be coming or going.
But the people that it bothers, what are they going? That puppet isn't really looking at the screen.
And the puppets, I love the fact that they were for the cinema sections, they were sprayed black.
Yes. So we didn't get a spill off of the Luma key wall, and that they would show up sharper in the silhouette. They were painted black.
So so it's pretty much how we're sitting now, isn't it? But the screen was really close to you.
When we shot, we had a little more distance to the wall, about where the front row is, and we were sitting shoulder to shoulder. Joel was in a chair. Kevin and I were sitting on the floor, or in these really uncomfortable kind of loungy seats, and we had the puppets on little stands next to us, and there was a monitor that we could see with the time code, and then we'd have our scripts with a time code line, and we could keep track of what was going on. But we'd rehearsed it a couple of times, so we knew where stuff was coming, but for timing and placement, it was helpful to have those cues for us.
I think there's another gentleman at the back, in the back row there.
Hi. Again, I've got kind of a two-part question. The first of which is, do you get a little bit cheesed off when you see every single DVD or Blu-ray coming out that's got director's commentaries on it? And think, we were there first.
Very true. Very, very true. Yeah, it was. Before that you created it.
Well, you know, actually on the Ghostbusters commentary track, they do it in silhouette. So it's a compliment, really. I think it's a compliment.
You and Joel and Josh did commentary for the Paul Feig movie recently?
Yes, The Heat.
The Heat.
The Paul Feig cop movie, Sandra Bullock and
I'm blanking on
I'm
her
blanking.
name.
I'm blanking.
Melissa McCarthy, yeah.
Yes.
That's what I'm blanking.
Paul Feig. Josh and I had worked with Paul on a pilot for a TV show called Fast Food Films, and we would take, the concept of the show is we would take a full-length movie like The Corpse Grinders and condense it down to 7 minutes and then make it into something different, like a commercial or something like that, or a little documentary. And that's where I met Paul, and we've all known him for years and years. And
He was on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which
that's
I
right, he was
worked on.
Mr. Poole.
Yeah.
Mr. Poole. And so if you pick up the Blu-ray, I only think it's on the Blu-ray of The Heat. You'll see Joel and Josh and I don't think we're in silhouette. I think we're just in, because I don't have a Blu-ray player, so I don't know.
We also have a question for someone. I don't know if maybe just shout out if you can't get to the microphone.
Okay. Have you ever met any of the stars of the movies that you've ripped on? And if so, what was their reaction? For example, have you ever met Red Brown of Space Mutiny? Because that'd be awesome.
I love that.
Fortunately, Frank and I didn't do that one, so we're blameless.
I might have met him, but I didn't know who he was. Yeah. It's possible that we had a very pleasant chat somewhere.
Yeah.
What about Joe Don Baker?
I think the Joe Don Baker thing is a myth. I don't think he actually hates us.
Thank you. And Trace is good friends with Kim Cattrall, who was in one of our movies, and that friendship started, right? Because she was in it.
Yeah, we did what was City Limits, and Crow had this crush on Kim, which I find out I think is Mike's friend Russ has had the crush, and that's where that came from. But someone told Kim about that episode, and she sent Crow flowers. Yeah. So and she had her phone number on there, so I called her and I said, "Is this Kim Cattrall from City Limits? I'm very sorry that we said things." And we became friends over the years. When she'd go out of town and I was visiting LA, she'd let me stay in her house. At least she said it was her house. And you met Robbie Benson.
Yeah, Robbie Benson, who was also in City Limits, was a director on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, was a show I worked on, and really nice guy, and loved what we did. There's a few others that we, Miles O'Keefe, I think, called us up.
One of the first.
Called us up one time, and just about everyone I can think of that we've interacted with that
Tia Carrera.
Tia Carrera, that Trace and I met, she was lovely. And also my favorite of all was Beverly Garland,
Oh, she was
who
great.
was in like 2 Roger Corman movies that we did, Gunslinger and It Conquered the World, I think. And then she was, after that she went on to be on My 3 Sons, which I used to watch when I was a kid, and I always adored her. And then she appeared at our first Mystery Science Theater convention that we did in Minneapolis, and she couldn't have been sweeter and nicer, and that was, I just love that.
She was just a great lady.
Yeah.
Also, Russell Johnson came, really nice guy, really funny guy. Someone asked him what he was doing now or where he lived, and he said, "I live on an island." He did. He lived somewhere in like Vancouver or Portland somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, most everybody that we met has been fantastic.
Yeah, I can't think of an instant. And the Joe Don Baker is supposedly, the urban legend is that he saw Mitchell and got really pissed off. But that's never been confirmed.
No, I don't think so. I think,
Yeah.
you know.
And if he did get pissed off, God bless him. He's welcome to it. You know, he's.
Oh, Ega. We met Ega.
Oh, Richard Keel.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice guy.
Yeah.
Ego is a special movie. Isn't it?
Yes.
What were they thinking? I just remembered the Sammy Frank, the director. He did.
He was the distributor.
Oh, he's the distributor.
This
I think he was
was
the
Sandy
director.
No, Sandy Frank, I think his whole role in those movies was he just bought them from Japan and distributed them in America. believe.
Mhm.
So he's fine.
Yeah.
You're publicising his movies. He loves it.
Yeah.
I think he was the director. Wonderful. Anybody else, guys? Do you want to shout out? Yes.
Another two-parter. First of all, did anybody have to pay Jim Mallon to use that clip?
Not yet.
Shh, don't tell.
Clearly in the early years, the show developed, the characters started developing relationships between Forrester and Frank,
Mhm.
and Joel Morales. And I wanted to ask, was that like, in the writing process, was that like organic? Did it just sort of, as the show went on, you got renewed, these things developed? Or was there sort of a decision made at some point when the show had legs that we have to create we have to create narrative, we have to like create.
Well, I think that happened at the Sci-Fi Channel. I think after both of us were gone, the Sci-Fi Channel imposed and said you have to have a story arc to your show. And then, from what I understand, that they insisted on having a story arc, and then they showed the episodes not in the right order anyway.
Yeah.
Which was.
Everybody, each character developed its own personality and the relationships between the different characters.
No, it was organic.
Yeah.
I think right from the start we knew that Forrester was a top and Frank was a bottom.
That's something I thought I'd never hear.
You know, that was one of the great things about doing whatever we wanted to do, is that, you know, we could take the characters in any direction. And Forrester and Frank slowly developed this sort of bizarre, unexplained relationship, collecting comic books at one point, or, you know.
It was never, from my memories, we never analyzed it.
No,
It just,
no.
and right from the start, I think, Trace and I both love the same kind of comedian. We both love Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers and Abbott and Costello, and so right away it was just unspoken and just instinctive that we were going to try to evoke those kind of old-time, very broad, very shticky kind of comedians, and I think that's what happened. It just was very natural.
There was never a Bible for the show.
Yeah, no.
There was never, and you know, breaking canon, people talk about that all the time. We didn't have one. You know, we just were freewheeling and no one was
Whatever
imposing.
felt like it would be fun, and
Yeah.
that's funny, let's do it, you know.
But I think the relationship between the two of you tells a lot on screen. I think it's hilarious. And from a viewer's point of view, I love the fact that there is a bit of there's a story there that you both got written out in a finality sort of way. You don't just disappear.
Right.
As an outside watcher, I think that's really that's really lovely to see.
Yeah.
Taken off to the other afterlife by talk.
Yeah, and you know, we also pioneered the concept of a character getting killed every week and then coming back, you know, which South Park kind of did that after us, but Forrester killed Frank on several occasions, and then I was just back on the next episode.
I've just watched The Brain That Wouldn't Die again, which is one of my favourite films to host, and again, it's just nice to top it, obviously, but when the chainsaw comes out at the end, I was like, that's obviously, is Frank going to be back in the next
We
episode?
did some very dark stuff. I think there was one where I was choking you with a pillow, which I saw that go by the other day, and I went, oh, wow.
It's like cartoonish, though.
Yeah, it's very cartoony. Yeah, I was just standing on his hospital bed, smothering him with a pillow.
As a performer, as a comedy performer, I've never had much use for dignity. It's never played a big part in my life as a performer. That's been intentional.
I do know the feeling. It's almost contractual, I think, now. It's my way. Is anybody? Oh, this gentleman over here.
Did you ever have a favourite invention?
Give him the mic.
A favorite invention from the Invention Exchange. Those were all Joel's things out of his act, and I don't.
I was very fond of the Rat Pack chess set.
Yes.
And what I'm very proud, and I actually remember that was Joel's idea, was to do a Rat Pack chess set. But I wrote the sketch, and if you watch that sketch, it's very scholarly in terms of the Rat Pack. It's all very accurate in terms of their relationships with each other. It brings in other people who are part of the Rat Pack, like Sammy Kahn, who you don't normally hear about. You know,
Jilly Rizzo.
Yeah, Jilly Rizzo, Toots Shore. You know, I love stuff like that that just has a lot of history, genuine history in it, but yet hopefully is still funny.
I was always happy with making the robots explode during a host segment. I was the pyro, so something's on fire, it blew up.
A lot of songs as well. You did quite a few numbers over the years.
Yeah.
We wrote a lot of, yeah, there was a little bit of a musical comedy element in Mystery Science Theater for sure, and a little bit of that kind of sensibility. Very silly songs.
Anybody else, guys?
Oh.
Let's get the microphone. Let's get the microphone to you so the people at the back can hear the. And
Which movie was your absolute favourite to riff?
To write?
Well, I think I was talking about that earlier. I really like Manos, the Hands of Fate. I like a lot, and I like I Accuse My Parents, and Skydivers I like, which I can't explain to people because there's something about the tonality of that movie that I really enjoy a lot. So, but you know, a lot of the films are a blur to me. Like I don't have specific memories of a lot of them because they all just kind of blend together into one wonderful nightmare.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of the particulars. In fact, I don't remember. I'll watch stuff on YouTube, and there's Frank and I dressed as pirates. And I know we did it because there it is on videotape, but I do not remember that at all. And it's a shock to see us as like Carmen Miranda or whatever, and it's just very startling.
one thing I hadn't realised, Tracy, that you actually directed quite a lot of the host segments. Did you take into? It probably might have just been the episodes I've watched lately, but did you take it in turns, or did you do a?
Yeah, we all rotated directing the host segments. Kevin, Jim, Mike, and I, and Joel when he was there. We all took a shot at directing it. You know, directing those episodes, the camera was locked down, so it was you know, not a lot of cinematography that we had to deal with. But it was a lot of fun deciding where stuff was going to happen, and you know,
I
stage
never. They wouldn't let me direct because I demanded final cut.
And so you should. Sorry guys, have I ever missed out anybody? Steve over here? That's nice and easy.
Did you ever have to watch any of those sort of high school industrial films, Crown Films or Iowa State University? Did you ever have to watch them when you were growing up?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I used to
what
show
are those?
those. Well, she's talking about the kind of educational films that they'd show for kids and stuff like A Date with Your Family, I think, would be something they'd show in schools. And there was one about, there were a few about like proper grooming, right? Weren't there like a few of those of like hygiene and about like being a good friend or whatever when you go to the soda shop, and you know, and I do remember and I remember when I was in school, I would always like it when they'd show a film because it didn't feel like school to me, you know.
Yeah. Back in those days, it was all on 16 millimeter, and you could look at the reel and see how long it was going to be. And it's like, all right, the whole time. But I remember our friend the Sun. And
that was Frank Capra made that.
Yes.
In the 50s, yeah.
What was I think I saw an interview on YouTube with you, Tracy. You were talking, I can't remember the name of the film, you might remember. It's not one you've done, which is Science Theatre. With the mouth and the ears.
Oh, somebody gave me the 16 millimeter film. It was an educational film about listening, about how you should listen. And it was a classroom of children, and the teacher transforms into a big set of plush fur lips, and each of the children turns into a fluorescent colored flesh or fur covered ear. And they all go out into the world to listen, how to listen. And
that was from the TV series Acid High.
I gave that film away to someone, and I wish I hadn't, because it was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen.
It is on YouTube. Well, I saw the interview with you today.
It's on YouTube?
Yeah, and I think it came up with underneath a subtitle of what the actual title of the movie and the year, and I went, ooh, Google, and it's on YouTube. I'll send you the link.
Oh,
it's even better and lovely. Your description is vivid, but the actual thing itself is. One more question, then we're going to talk about a new project. Any more? This, you sure?
One of the most important things that I learned from Mystery Science Theatre 3000 as a viewer was a lot about comic time, because the positioning of the lines and the riffs, and even in the host segments. As people involved in the creation of the show, what was the most important thing that you took away from your time on Mystery Science Theatre?
Wow. I think just writing a lot of jokes and not being, not owning them, you know, because we had so many jokes to write. And certainly with Cinematic Titanic, you know, sometimes you write a joke and you want it, oh, I really want to say that. But it would be better if Frank said it. So that it becomes less ownership of it. Because sometimes you can kill a joke.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I took from it is just how when the collaborative process in comedy, when it works, how you can be part of creating something that's so much better than what you just would have come up with yourself, you know, working with other people who are like-minded. Someone else in the room might say something, like I might say an unfunny joke, which believe me, I say a lot, but that might spark someone else to think of a brilliant joke, you know, and there's like that kind of back and forth, and I've just always valued that since then, and I've always sought that on the other TV shows that I've worked on, is just finding that kind of really simpatico, creative collaboration that can, great things just can result from that.
I agree. I've always written by myself for comedy, and now I've just started writing with other people. And it's a different discipline, but it's a gestalt.
I mean, I like writing by myself too. I mean, I do a lot of that, but I like how when you're done with that and you put it out in the world, then it becomes a collaboration with other actors or other creative people, and then it becomes something better than it originally was.
I think it works very well.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're still working together today, which these are very neatly.
Welcome, my friends, to the exclusive United Kingdom premiere of The Frank. Don't be afraid, we're having a very special gathering at Sci-Fi-London. All of your friends will be there, and there will be singing and dancing, and we'll have something very special to show you. But not yet! Special London premiere of The Frank, starring Frank Conniff and Beaulieu, only at Sci-Fi London.